How you doing, fellow Christians? Jesus is Lord. I'm outside again, so if you hear a rooster or dogs barking, well, we'll try to get over it. I want to have a little bit of a Bible study today, or just reading it, reading a little bit about David. I think we're living in a David and Goliath time. Things seem like they're giants. How do we compete against, even in the physical, how are you going to compete against a nuclear bomb? How are you going to compete against an army of drones? How are you going to compete against biowarfare? How are you going to compete against weather warfare? How are you going to compete against direct energy weapons? I mean, you aren't going to compete against them just as being your average Joe. It's going to take miracles. It's going to take faith. And I think David gives us a good story. It's not just a little kid story, although I remember as a child, everybody loves the story of David. Everybody likes giants and what have you. But the fact is, it's true. And we're all dealing with these giants on a daily basis. And I've said, think about it, even in the world system, you might think you have problems in this. Take away these gods of electricity and gasoline. Electricity and gasoline, and within 8 hours, your world's upside down. You go to the faucet, you can't get a glass of water. You go to the toilet and you can't flush it. Depending on what time of the year it is, at 6 p.m. or 8 p.m., if you don't have some candles, you're staggering around. We don't realize what we're subtly slaves to during these times. So let's just get back to the realization is we aren't who we think we are. We're nothing. So we better have Jesus Christ within our hearts to guide us in everything. But this might be a little bit of a longer lesson, might even cut it in two. But I want to talk about the situation with David. Now, prior, how did David get introduced? Saul gets thrown out of the kingdom by God. Saul was the king. He was the tallest, most handsome guy. So the people voted him in. That's basically how politics are. The best looking guy gets voted in. Yeah, he has to have some attributes. But the fact of the matter is it's a lot to do with the eyeball, the ability to speak, etc., etc. Saul becomes the king. God didn't even want to have any kings. He wanted to be their king. But the people said, hey, everybody else has a king. We want one. So Saul became the king and he became disobedient. God told him to kill every last one of the Amalekites. He did not. He kept the king around and all the goods, the good stuff, to make a short story out of a long one. So another king is getting sought out. So this is where I'll pick it up. 1 Samuel chapter 16. And Samuel was the prophet. Samuel was the prophet looking for the next king. And Samuel said unto Jesse, are all your children here? And he said, there remains yet the youngest, and behold, he keeps the sheep. And Samuel said unto Jesse, send and fetch him, for we will not sit down till he comes. And he sent and he brought him. Now he was ruddy. Good possibility that David was a redhead. And he had beautiful countenance. He was a beautiful looking kid. And he was godly to look at, goodly to look to. And the Lord said, arise and anoint him, for this is he. And he must have passed that on to the next generation, because Absalom, his son, who kind of turned traitor, who King Joab ended up killing when he shouldn't have. But his son Absalom was supposedly beautiful too, according to the gospel. Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brethren, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon David. So Samuel rose up and went to Ramah. But the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord troubled him. And Saul's servant said unto him, behold, now an evil spirit from God troubles thee. So God will use an evil spirit. Yeah, he'll use it. You know, he replaced his spirit with an evil one. He must have been very upset with Saul. You know, to whom much is given, much is expected. And Saul became the king. That's a lot of expectations. And he didn't listen to God. And he listened to the people. He feared the people more than he feared God. Let this be a lesson. You know, this isn't, and God just didn't say, oh, well, that was a tough call, Saul. Yeah, you were in a corner. No. He took his spirit away from him and he replaced it with an evil spirit. And Saul's servant said unto him, behold, now an evil spirit from God troubles thee. So even his servants knew this. Let our Lord now command thy servants which are before thee to seek out a man who is a cunning player of a harp. And it shall come to pass when the evil spirit from God is upon thee, that he shall play with his hand, and thou shalt be well. Something about music, gang. Even his servants knew. Get this musician in here that's a good string player. Isn't that amazing? This music has always been following us up until, now. Especially if you're from the 70s or 80s with the hard rock and the stringed instruments and all the craziness. It ruled a whole generation. You could say it destroyed a whole generation. And Saul said unto his servants, provide me now a man that can play well and bring him to me. Then answered one of his servants and said, behold, I have seen a son of Jesse, the Bethlehemite, that is cunning in playing and a mighty valiant man. And we know David's just a king, but they were a kid, but they're referring to him as a man here. A man of war and prudent in matters and a comely person, beautiful. And the Lord is with him. Wherefore Saul sent messengers unto Jesse and said, send me David, your son, which is with thy sheep. So even David was a young man. He was known as a warrior. Probably what he did to we're told later he killed lions, he killed bears, protecting the sheep. And now we're told he's a great musician. This David was something else. He knew what to do with his quiet time. He learned how to use a sling, a man of war. He knew how to play an instrument. He was a valiant man. And Jesse took an ass laden with bread and a bottle of wine and a kid and sent them by David, his son, to Saul. And David came to Saul and stood before him, and he loved him greatly and became his armor bearer. You almost could say David, the young man, became Saul's right-hand man. But by the providence of God, Saul, or David, was eventually going to take Saul's place. Very interesting story here. And Saul sent to Jesse, saying, let David, I beg thee, stand before me, for he has found favor in my sight. And it came to pass when the evil spirit from God was upon Saul, that David took a harp and played with his hand. So it was the music, but also we know that David was a man anointed by God. It wasn't just a musical instrument. This musical instrument is being played by a man anointed by God to take the place of the man that he's playing it to. So Saul was refreshed and was well, and the evil spirit departed from him. I believe the evil spirit couldn't handle being around David. Yeah, that's what I believe. It wasn't just the music; it was who was playing the music. Now the music is frequencies, and it can deal with us emotionally. We know that, but it was the man who had the Spirit of the Lord on him that made this demon depart from Saul. Now we get into the warrior story, chapter 17. Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Sokosh, which belongs to Judah, and pitched between Sokosh and Azekah in Ephesadim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and pitched by the valley of Iyah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and the Israelites stood on a mountain on the other side, and there was a valley between them. Self-explanatory. It's like watching one of these movies. They're all on one side, all on the other, a valley in between. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines called Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits in a span. Some say it's like 9'6". I've heard some say it's 11. He was a giant. And he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass, and he had greaves of brass upon his legs, and target of brass between his shoulders, and the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam. And his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron. One bearing a shield went before him. And he stood and he cried unto the armies of Israel, and said unto them, Why are you come out to set your army in array? Am I not a Philistine, and you the servants of Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. Matter of fact, he's calling him on. That's what you used to say when you were in the neighborhood. Come on, give me your best shot. Who's going to fight for you? And the Philistines said, Defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man, that we may fight together. When Saul and all the Israelites heard the words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. They were terrified of this one guy. This one guy. They were terrified of his challenge. Obviously, because of what he looked like in the flesh. Now David was the son of Ephrathite of Benjamin, whose name was Jesse. And Jesse had 8 sons, and the man went among men for an old man in the days of Saul. So this guy Jesse was David's dad. He was pretty old by this time. And the 3 eldest sons of Jesse went and followed Saul to the battle. And the names of his 3 sons that went to battle were Eliab the firstborn, the next was Abinab, and the third was Shema. And David was the youngest, and the 3 eldest followed Saul. But David went and returned unto Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And the Philistine drew near morning and evening and presented himself 40 days. Every night and every day for 40 days, this Philistine was going to the army saying, Come on, 40 days. Now we know there's something about 40 days. Jesus Christ fasted 40 days when he was in the wilderness, when Satan came to get him. We know it rained for 40 days and 40 nights before the rain stopped flooding. This 40-day thing seems to be a finality number. It's a turning point with the 40 days. And Jesse said unto David his son, Take now for thy brother an ephah of his parched corn, these 10 loaves, and run to the camp to thy brother. And carry these 10 cheeses unto the captain of their 1,000. And look how thy brethren fare, and take their pledge. Long story short, it appears Jesse saying, Hey, get these to your brother. Here's some food, and tell me what's going on. I'm nosy. I want to know what's happening. And now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. And David rose up early in the morning and left the sheep with a keeper. So he left his sheep with a keeper. He just didn't leave the sheep. And he took and he went, and Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the trench, as was the host was going forth to the fight, and shouted for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army. Right? So they're getting ready, the full-blown warfare in the valley. And David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage and ran into the army and came and saluted his brethren. And as he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words. And David heard them. The same words. Goliath said, Give me your best man. If I beat him, you're our slaves. If he beats us, we're your slaves. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were sore afraid. It appears every time Israel sees this giant, they're afraid. Now we know this whole book is a foreshadowing of Jesus in the Old Testament. We're told that by Peter. And it's for our admonishment. It's for us. And we know what Goliath represents. He represents the evil in the world, the deception of the world. He represents the cares of the world. He represents what we see, taste, touch, smell, and hear. He represents our fleshly ambitions. He represents everything in the flesh nature. That's what he represents. That's trying to kill the spirit. And sometimes our problems, our issues, our situations, whether they come directly from Satan, attacks, or whether they're birthed as consequences from God because of our sins. And that's something you have to take to the Lord. Why is this trouble on me? Am I sinning? And you have to ask. You have to go before the Lord and reason together. What's going on? How come all these things are happening? Did I get into debt? Was it my tongue that got me in trouble? Was it my eyes that got me in trouble? Was it my words? Whatever it was. Check yourself out. What Paul says is give yourself a self-examination. But regardless, a monster is coming at you. And this was Goliath. And the chosen people of God were terrified of him. But here's where David starts showing himself. And now David has a couple things to deal with. And the men of Israel said, have you seen this man that has come up? Surely to defy Israel he has come up. And it shall be that the man who kills him, the king will enrich this man with riches and will give him his daughter and will make his father's house free in Israel. And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, what shall be done to this man that kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach of Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine? It's the first thing he says. First question. Well, basically the second. But he says, who is this uncircumcised Philistine? And we know circumcision was a sign of the covenant. Abraham, in the physical, along with his house, from Abraham on, had to be circumcised to say they were the true children of the one God. That's what made the distinction. And that must have horrified all the other nations. Needless to say, particularly if you're a male, can you even imagine it? I can't even imagine it. Yet, grown men were getting circumcised because God told Abraham, this is the sign. The most painful, the most disgusting, probably the most paralyzing thing. You can only imagine how long it took to heal. But he said, this will be the sign of my people. Circumcision. And without going into too much detail, we know now in Romans last two verses, your heart is circumcised. The hardness of your heart has to be pulled back. And that's what distinguishes you as a true spiritual Jew, becoming an invisible stone in the church of God. A circumcised heart. But in the physical here, that's the first thing David said. This uncircumcised Philistine. In other words, this guy doesn't have the kingdom covenant of ours God. Who is this guy? And that he should defy the armies of the living God. And the people answered him after this manner, saying, so shall it be done to the man that kills him. So, whoever kills this guy is basically going to get the king's daughter. He's going to get some of the kingdom. The king's going to practically bow down to whoever can kill this giant. And guess what? Here we go. The human mind, David's oldest son, and Eliab, his eldest brother, or not eldest son, David's eldest brother, Jesse's eldest son, Eliab. And Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spake unto the men. And Eliab, anger was kindled against David. And he said, why did you come down here? And why did you leave the sheep in the wilderness? Well, first of all, he didn't leave the sheep in the wilderness. He left a keeper with the sheep. But this is what David says. And with whom hast thou left those sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride and the naughtiness of your heart. Wow. Here's a young kid just totally loaded with innocent faith. Right? But backed up, and we'll read that, but backed up by experience. And we'll get into that. For thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. And David says, what have I now done? Is there not a cause? In other words, David's saying, what are you talking about? This is a serious issue. For 40 days, this guy Goliath has been saying that, he's been defying our God. This is a cause. And you have a cause, and I have a cause. And the cause is we have a God, and his name is Jesus, the Word of God manifested in the flesh, who died on the cross for our sins. And no other religion, nothing can even compare to him. All things were created by him, for him, through him, for his glory. And he saved you and I by his blood on that cross. He is our God, and that's our cause. And he turned from him toward another and spake after the same manner. And the people answered him again after the former manner. And when the words were heard which David spake, they went and they rehearsed them before Saul. And Saul sent for him. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail. Because of him, thy servant will go and fight with the Philistine. Now you got to remember, Saul knew there was something about this guy, David. Saul knew there was something special about David. I don't believe Saul just said, okay, this young man saying he's going to take on a giant and let him go. No. Remember, when David would show up and play that harp, Saul had a complete change. The evil spirit would leave. It must have been incredible because he was set free. So Saul knew David was special. And I believe that's why Saul didn't ridicule David like the brothers did. And Saul said to David, thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. And David said unto Saul, thy servant kept his father's sheep. And there came a lion and a bear and took a lamb out of the flock, and I went after him and smote him and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he rose against me, I caught him by his beard and smote him and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised, here we go again, uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. So even Saul, he backed off a little. He said, you're just a youth. How are you going to do this? But Saul knew how special David was. And now David is giving him his laundry list of what he's performed. He said, I'm no rookie to this warfare. I protected the sheep. I know how to kill these enemies. So Saul must have been listening. And David said, moreover, the Lord has delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear. He will deliver me out of the hand of the Philistine. And Saul said unto David, go, and the Lord will be with thee. He told him, the Lord delivered me out of the paw of the lion. He just didn't say, I killed the bear and the lion. He knew. The Lord delivered him out of the paw. The paw. Not even the mouth, the paw. It was like, must have been a wrestling match with those sharp claws. But David was delivered out of it. And that's what Jesus Christ delivered us out of the mouth of Satan, because Satan wants to devour us. And devour means to eat in one gulp. But when we trust in God, it doesn't matter how big the mountain is. We could move it out of the way in faith. Now the thing is to walk in righteousness. A lot of these mountains we might be putting in front of us because of our own actions. So every man, look at yourself. Every woman, look at yourself. Give yourself a self-examination. I'll read that again. And David said, moreover, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of the Philistine. And Saul said unto David, go, and the Lord be with thee. And Saul armed David with his armor, and he put a helmet of brass upon his head. Also he armed him with a coat of mail. And David girt his sword upon his armor, and he assayed it to go. And that means he tried to walk